Hello, everybody. I am Daniel P. Riley of whimsyland.org, literary coaching and services, and I want to do a video today about inspiration because I woke up with an idea in my head. And usually, when that happens, it occupies most of my creative ability. It just sort of lives in the back of my mind and begins to grow and work itself out. But since I have the opportunity to sit down and do a little bit of writing today, I thought I would show you guys kind of how I start the process. Maybe it'll help you, maybe it won't. Who knows? So, usually, when I become consumed with a concept, I'll do what I call a brain dump, a free write, whatever you want to call it. So that's what we're going to do today. I am going to work this process out and try to talk through it. Never done that before, so we'll give it a shot. So first things first here, I'm going to yeah. All right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to make myself a new document in my handy dandy Word program. And I think we're going to just call it Daydream for the moment. I have a whole document that I keep of these. If nothing pans out of it, usually what happens is I'll copy and paste it into that document and just sort of leave it there for later if maybe something else I daydream up comes to mind that links to it, then I have that information already at my disposal. So it works out. It's a really nice and easy way to keep your thoughts and use them for later. All right. So here's what I've been dreaming of. So far this morning, all I can think about is a 3-cast set of characters and the bare bones of a concept. And to start with that concept, I'm going to try to type it out. So it's a pretty standard trope, but I think the beauty of it is going to be in the characterizations, as always. So a young woman loses her family to a vicious warlord. Left alone, she struggles to survive until she finds 2 men from very different worlds with incredible skills and we'll say dark pasts. Seems like an appropriate statement. Who choose to help her take her revenge. I think it's a pretty basic revenge trope. We've seen it before in a few fun things. Now, for cast, tentative name for the young lady, we're going to call her Lyra. And we'll just put, for the time being, Lyra's father opposed a warlord who sent his soldiers to wipe out their family. Lyra escaped, living on the streets of the neighboring city. So the idea being that she escaped and fled the area. Now, what I'm thinking is this means that the story should be in a historical fantasy setting. Obviously, fantasy setting because incredible skills means they could be super competent warriors or have some sort of magical ability that gives them an edge over your competent soldier in these situations. But also, the idea being that in those times, it was frequent for there to be travelers, but not frequent enough to say someone couldn't hide in a city that was only maybe an hour of travel away from where an event happened. This is a thing that we as writers need to be aware of, is that is our concept and our setting and our character details, are they relevant to the setting and do they make sense in a more modern city with, say, the internet and social media and things like that? It would be far more difficult to blend in and keep a low profile, that as we see in modern TV shows, there's CCTV and so on and so forth. So putting this in a slightly more medieval, maybe dark ages, not quite sure exactly what the setting's going to be just yet, but putting it in a time period where the main way to pass information is word of mouth. So one person to the next, and that person travels to another place. You're far more likely to be able to hide if you're fleeing persecution or, assassination, as it were. So, what type of person do we want Lyra to be? Now, normally I would go into the long personality matrix, but for the purposes of just jotting this idea down, I'm just going to throw my thoughts out there. So, I want Lyra to be more of a traditional woman of her time. So since we're leaning more towards medieval, dark ages, so on and so forth, and we're going to lean a little bit towards the highlights of soft personality and hard personality. Now, I'm assuming from what I know of the concept so far that her father may have been some sort of minor noble, a person of repute. So that means she grew up in a rather comfortable setting. So she'll have general skills of what's known as the hearth. So we'll say Lyra is Anne, excellent cook, seamstress, and has a beautiful singing voice, just for a personal detail. She is kind-hearted and warm, but learning to survive as a peasant orphan has hardened her. Now, I'm not going to worry too much about what she looks like at the moment. Some characters have sprung physically formed in my mind. Some are still kind of hazy, so I'm not going to put too much attention on this. Now, Lyra is a very basic person. She's normal. Her life has been what she considers to be mundane. Her father did his work, mother oversaw the house, taught her and maybe her siblings. She might have siblings, we don't know, and they may have been killed too. But the loss of her family and then being forced to figure out how to exist in a world she doesn't understand has hardened her heart a bit. So I'm going to give her in personality now. She's often tomboyish and defensive. So that sets up a demeanor. This demeanor is, as many people do, social armor. Having to live on the street, if you've ever been a homeless person before, you don't have to be cruel, but you do have to keep your head on a swivel, and you do have to protect the few things that you have in the world. And so we're going to give her those traits where the story starts. But the background of her actual nature, is to be a kind and warm, feminine woman of a background of means. Now, character number 2, tentatively, since I don't have a name yet, we're just going to call him the Wild Horse. I almost wanted to go with a bull, but that seems too on the nose. So we're going to call him the Wild Horse. Now, the Wild Horse comes from a distant nation. And we'll say disconnected from his tribe during a failed raid. So my idea for this is that he is going to be something of perhaps a Viking, a Goth, some raiding unit of people, and the raid obviously failed. Most of his people were killed. I'm going to say he was injured, and instead of dying, he survived, but became one of the many faceless people of this neighboring city that Lyra ends up going to. So let's do we'll say with bruised honor. Settled for odd jobs of strength and some criminality to fund an excessive drinking habit. Common trope. People, when they fall down hard, and some people need to cope. And back then, excessive alcoholism is a fairly common trope for any type of fantasy story. Now, to explain what it is that he can do. Actually, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, not so much that he was disconnected from his tribe during a failed raid, but maybe he was the raid leader. I like that. We'll put that in as a potential in parentheses. Was the raid leader. Creating a deep sense of loss of both honor and dignity. Now, being the raid leader means that he was a warrior of some great potential, which further explains his skills as one of the three main members of the cast. And what is that special ability going to be? So the way I've been dreaming this is that the two characters are broken warriors, and they represent two things. Very simple systems. They represent offense and defense. So what I think I want the wild horse to do is be the defense. So possessing for now we'll call it a magical skill known as tentatively demon armor, allowing the wild horse to summon an aura of protection around himself. That deflects most common attacks. See, this power also comes with an inherent flaw if it's not used correctly, and that could be the reason for why this happened. Perhaps because of his ability, he became so egotistical about it that he overcompensated, and what's the word I'm looking for? He didn't anticipate the strength of his enemy. Yeah, that's good. So we'll go back up to this paragraph, and perhaps he was so prideful that he underestimated. That's what I was looking for. Now, this gives us the opportunity, too, to create an oppositional character further down the road who witnessed this character in action and perhaps may have been the reason for his downfall, be something for the wild horse to overcome during the course of the story. That might be a great detail. I think that's good for the moment with the wild horse. It gives just enough information for me to expand on as I think more on the concept and sit down and work on it, but it allows for open expansion, not pigeonholed too hard into one specific thing. Now that we've created our defense, I want to create our offense. So, do we do traditional swordsman like everybody else does? That's sort of how I've been dreaming of this character. But I'm wondering if maybe a more unique weapon, or perhaps not unique, but underutilized weapon might be preferable. Something to think about. For the time being, we are just going to refer to him as the Sword. Now, the Sword, we're going to say, was a member of the city's soldiery. So we're setting him up as a former soldier in defense of this, which means that he may have actually fought the Wild Horse when the Wild Horse and his people raided. That sets up an interesting opposition, sort of an odd couple situation between the two of them. Once lauded for his amazing weapon skills. Let's say he was an up and coming member of the city's military with a great future. So we're setting him up for a big pedestal to fall off of. And the way I've been envisioning it is until an event that cost him his dominant arm. Now that's a big deal when you're a soldier, when you're a warrior. The use of your primary limb, like this is my primary hand. Losing this hand would make everything very difficult. Even though I do practice, like on the piano, etc., the dexterity for this hand, which helps me with my typing skills, still losing my primary hand, the research that I've done about this, the mind has trouble compensating for that because it's so used to the muscle memory that's ingrained into this arm. This arm knows how to quickly pick things up, manipulate objects, and type things like that. This arm does far less of that, so it has less muscle memory built up over all of my years of living. No matter how hard I try, it's still going to be the inferior side of me. A lot of people have learned how to compensate and become what's known as ambidextrous, which is using both hands in almost equal capacity. But if you haven't trained to do so, you're going to be at a disadvantage. So he has the knowledge of how to succeed in battle in his mind, but he's lost the muscle memory that was so integral in doing that and losing his primary limb. So, forced into retirement, the Sword lived a meager life of bored luxury until actually that became a spiral into deep depression until the stipends ran out, leaving him a pauper. We'll say that he has a home in the city, but it's become derelict because he hasn't bothered to do anything. And I think that depression is going to be the reason. Seeing no purpose In his life, the sword simply waits to die. So now we have these two very flawed characters. We have a failed warrior who misjudged the situation and got his people killed. He has a deep pain in his heart from that happening and drowns it in immoral behavior. And then we have another broken character suffering pretty much the same way, but it is reacting to it by closing himself off and simply withering. So he has great skill and understanding, but he's let himself go. And that's what I'm seeing here. So Lyra becomes the linchpin between the two of them. It gives them a reason to lean back on the things that they used to believe in and used to do in separate ways. You know, the wild horse might believe in the revenge more than anything else. The sword might believe in the settlement of justice. This warlord shouldn't have murdered that entire family, and now he should pay. And if there was ever a reason to put his skills to use in whatever capacity he can, then he would do it. It gives him a purpose that has been missing for all of these years. I'm thinking that both of these men are going to be significantly older than her, which means that their connection is going to be something of a um, found family, uncles, and young niece perspective. So, not looking at any romance in this specifically, but as people are multi layered, we can add some things to the two of them, such as, let's say, the wild horse is a hit with the ladies of the brothels for his quote unquote manly ways. But commits to none of them, obviously. And we can say that the sword's depression ruined his relationship with the one woman he truly loved. What would she do if she truly loved him, but she couldn't stay with him because he was ineffective in his life? Then she has a few options: go home to her family, be a spinster, take another person to be in a relationship with her. Because if I do this as these men have been living this way for a long time, we'll say 5 to 10 years, that's a lot of time to pass. And people make decisions and experience new things through that if they're actually motivated. So this woman that the sword loved would potentially remarry. Well, not remarry, because we're not going to say that they got married, but they were heading in that direction. Potentially marry someone else that was effective, even though she may not love that person as deeply as she loved the sword. It's a it's a fairly tragic but beautiful, dramatic beat, and it may come up somewhere in the story. Or we can go wholesome, and she, even though he was unable to pull himself out of the dark hole and she could not help him, maybe she is still waiting for him, and she might have joined, something akin to a nunnery, or ooh, oh, that's good. We'll say she joined a sect of women who study medicine and healing, committing her life to saving others to atone for not being able to save him from himself. So that sort of gave her life a new purpose. If she could not save the one she loved, she would learn to save as many people as she possibly can and dedicate her life to the healing arts. I like that. That's nice. I might have to come up with her as a supporting character, which we won't do in a video. So far, this is what we've got. Concept: a young woman loses her family to a vicious warlord. Left alone, she struggles to survive until she finds two men from very different worlds with incredible skills and dark pasts who choose to help her take her revenge. The cast was Lyra. Lyra's father opposed a warlord who sent his soldiers to wipe out their family. Lyra escaped, living on the streets of the neighboring city. Lyra's an excellent cook, seamstress, and has a beautiful singing voice. She's kind-hearted and warm, but learning to survive as a peasant orphan has hardened her. Now she's often tomboyish and defensive. The wild horse comes from a distant nation, disconnected from his tribe during a failed raid. He was injured, survived, and with bruised honor settled for odd jobs of strength and some criminality to fund an excessive drinking habit. Potential: he was the raid leader, creating a deep sense of loss of both honor and dignity. Perhaps he was so prideful that he underestimated the defenses of the city. Possesses a magical skill known as demon armor, allowing the wild horse to summon an aura of protection around himself that deflects most common attacks. The wild horse is a hit with the ladies of the brothels for his manly ways, but commits to none of them, obviously. The sword was a member of the city's soldiery, once lauded for his amazing weapon skills. He was an up-and-coming member of the city's military with a great future until an event that cost him his dominant arm. Forced into retirement, the sword lived a meager life of bored luxury that became a spiral in the deep depression until the stipends ran out, leaving him a pauper. Seeing no purpose in his life, the sword simply waits to die. The sword's depression ruined his relationship with the one woman he truly loved. She joined a sect of women who study medicine and healing, committing her life to saving others to atone for not being able to save him from himself. Yeah, that's good. It's a nice start to a new story concept that may take months, if not years, to fully grow. But this gets all of this out of my head and onto the page. And that was the purpose of doing this today. When you feel inspired, even if you feel inspired to do something that's not what you normally do, get it out of your head. It'll help you focus. So now I can commit my time to working on some more Aes Sedai and some more Legacy Hero stuff, which I hope you'll all look forward to when it all comes out. But for now, Go be great.